Welcome back to headquarters, Hotshot. Well, no, but that sounds more fitting to me than office, considering most of our work isn't done here. And I definitely prefer it to home base because this isn't tag or something. Though, I suppose it does have elements of hide and seek. Okay, let's take the flash drive back to my office. Okay, that doesn't feel odd to me. Then again, I do a fair amount of work in it. Anyway, we're gonna take the flash drive back to my office and start reviewing the evidence. 2 to 3 days, just depending on how much evidence there is. We have to stop the playback and record timestamps for each piece, both when it starts and when it stops. So, more phenomena means a longer investigation just by nature of how long it takes to make all the necessary notations, because we're checking all of the footage off of every camera. So, it does tend to compound the length of things just a bit, but it's all necessary. We don't want to miss anything. We also try to do some research into the history of the building to see if we can maybe discover a source of the haunting. Sometimes. Sometimes it feels almost impossible. If it's a newly built home, for instance. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, if it's a building that's been there for centuries and it's seen lots of death or even lots of just general upheaval that comes with a city growing and aging. In the case of the new build, it can be hard to find any reason why it might be haunted. With the older ones, it's an overabundance of possibilities. In those cases, it's really rare to get lucky enough that you can pinpoint a specific person. Well, I mean, they are still people at the end of the day, even if they aren't alive anymore and aren't exactly corporeal. Ignoring that isn't right. And it also leads to us missing potential causes or potential reasons for hauntings. That's a really common misconception, but no. It isn't always about where someone died or the manner in which it happened. Sometimes it's so much simpler than that. Sometimes it's about a person, a grandfather staying around to watch over his family, and then that desire to remain connected to his loved ones, to stay near them, ends up stretching through centuries as generations of his family come to the family homestead for Christmases or bar mitzvahs or just living life there. And that love he had, it still spreads and grows, and it has to go somewhere. So he continues to stay with them, whether in that home or going wherever they go, because he loves them. And then sometimes it's about an item. Like, did you have a teddy bear or a blankie or something when you were a kid? Something that mattered to you? Okay, yes. And you poured love into it, potentially so much that your spirit, some core part of you and your essence, is bound into it and just goes with it wherever it might end up. One time we were investigating a haunting at an antique store. God, that was almost an impossible nightmare of an answer to find. But merchandise was getting moved around enough to the point where booth owners were absolutely certain some of their items were getting stolen overnight. And I don't blame them. The store was massive. And while there was a pattern to what was going missing, mostly all Victorian era glassware, There really wasn't a rhyme or a reason to where things were ending up, and sometimes it took days to find. So the owner reached out to us. We sent a whole team over there and investigated for 4 days straight. Oh God, the evidence review was insane. Lots of orbs. Oh, we'll get to that in just a bit. Anyway, orbs, strange shadows, a couple of interesting full body apparitions, even. Oh man, it was amazing. But nothing that explained the moving merchandise. Until we caught it happening on camera. Only one water glass, and it was only a few inches, but it was enough to give us a thread to start tugging on. Oh, you're never going to believe the answer. Okay, okay, that's fair. So it took us a while to unravel the string, but the end of the spool was that it was all because of a mantle that dated back to 1839. It had been custom built for a woman named Amelia Weathers as a wedding gift from her new husband. It was installed in the master bedroom of their newly built home and stayed there until the home was gutted for renovation in 2020, when it ended up at the antique store. It was removed carefully and respectfully, but Amelia went with it. She wasn't evidencing a particularly intelligent haunting, but she wasn't completely residual either. What she was doing was fascinating. See, Amelia had loved to entertain when she was alive. What she was doing in the antique store was finding all of the glassware that she recognized. Victorian era glassware. Yeah, exactly. She was finding it and putting it away at the end of the day, mostly into cupboards that were from the same time frame, and sometimes into Victorian reproduction china hutches, because it didn't belong sitting out, even if that sitting out was in a glass display case. Because it wasn't with the rest of the glassware if it's sitting there with a mishmash of items that might span in time all the way up until the 1980s. And it was all because of the love of that mantle. It had been given in love, received in love, and then seen their family through generations of it. Some part of her just stayed attached to it. Like the way linseed oil sinks into wood, it permeates it. The essence of Amelia's spirit permeated that mantle. That sounded so much less weird until I voiced it. Those do happen, and it can be dangerous to ignore the possibility. I prefer to focus on the cases of a ghost being because love endured. But hate is a valid, strong emotion, too. And that's really what the root cause of any haunting is. A strong emotion, love, regret, fear, hatred, any of the other vast multitude of emotions, deeply held, that endures beyond the span of your natural life. I don't. Don't look at me that way. I honestly don't think the ghost tonight was hostile. It was a lot of hostile intent without the follow through, if that makes sense. A lot of banging, a lot of noise, a lot of yelling, a lot of that oppressive feeling of threat that sits like a knot in your chest and tightens until it pulls in your whole being. But nothing happened to us. No scratches, nothing actually thrown at us, nothing that would have actually harmed us in any way at all. Oh, yeah. I once investigated a home where I had a knife shudder violently in the knife block on the kitchen island before falling out of it, in a way, I should mention, that it was physically impossible for it to have done on its own, and barely miss slicing my finger. You know that old hospital outside town? Yeah, that one. The Historical Preservation Society asked us to investigate the tuberculosis ward. I left that investigation with a 6-inch long set of claw marks down my arm. Oh, it was fine. They healed in a couple of days. I did say that, mostly because I needed you to stay calm. We were in a building that was halfway burned with what seemed to be an intelligent haunting that very much did not want us there. But also because I meant it. I left with scratch marks that day, but it couldn't have killed me. The knife would have given me a small slice at worst. Even hostile ghosts, and they absolutely do exist, can only do so much, and none of it is really permanent. My point is, nothing like that happened tonight. I don't know who that was yet, but I don't think they wanted to harm us. If that had been their intention, we would have known. I'm gonna sit down and get to work. My adrenaline's still pumping, and I intend to take full advantage of it. You can stay if you want, but if you would rather go home and go to bed, I understand. Oh, well, then take that seat right there. And I've got a spare laptop you can use. We can copy the flash drive over and divide and conquer. Look, before we really start digging into this, though, you don't have to keep pretending that you're fine if you don't want to. I won't judge and I won't say I told you so. The, the almost too even breathing has been sort of a good indicator, even apart from the white knuckled grip you've had on all of the equipment since we heard that voice. Not to mention the hypervigilance. I, uh, I recognize that look in your eyes. I've seen it more than once. Yeah, you aren't the first skeptic who's had their world turned a little upside down after coming on an investigation. It's okay if you need to take some time to process it all. It isn't exactly traumatic, per se, but it can be destabilizing. And it's okay to need to take some time to cope with that and come to grips with it. Well, logicking your way through it is a valid response too, but just if it starts to feel overwhelming at all, take a breather, okay? Okay. Then let's get down to documenting, Hotshot.